If you're getting started as a property investor and you've yet to purchase your home, then the challenge is, do you start with buying your home first or buying that investment property first? This is a challenge that many people struggle with when they're getting started in property. So let's find out which is the best way to do it. Hey, if you're watching my videos for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I share with you my 15 plus years of property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your own property investing journey. I've got more than 300 videos now on the channel really to help you with just that. Some of the biggest property gurus in the world, the likes of Grant Cardone and Robert Kiyosaki, they talk about not owning your home, but instead investing that money into assets that's going to generate income that would pay for the rent on the house that you live in, rather than owning it, which is dead money. But does that make sense? When in the UK, we're just obsessed with owning a home and owning property. So what is it that's stopping you from buying both, buying a home and buying investment property? Well, it comes down to these. It's not having enough cash to be able to do that. Often we're starting with a small amount of money. Where is it we're going to spend it? How are we going to utilize it? Now, if we're going to purchase an investment property as our first purchase rather than a home, what's the benefits of that? Let's talk about that first. Well, what you're doing, you're creating income straight away. If you're purchasing an investment property, it's going to generate you an income. Now you've got cash flow coming from that property. You haven't got the overheads that you would have on a home cost. Your costs are remaining low as they are wherever you're living. Maybe you're living with parents right now, but now you've got an income that you're producing. Or it may even be you're purchasing that investment property, you're going to improve it, maybe sell it on and come back with a bigger pot of cash. That means now you've got more money to start with. At the same time, you're developing your skills, you're understanding the business of property and property investing. You'll become much more aware of the different strategies and the techniques that you can use to make money from property. Because not all of it is about using your own money as well, because you could use other people's money. But if you've got some experience and understanding, or you're already doing some purchases, then it makes it so much easier to raise money from other people. When you're purchasing investment property, you might be borrowing, say, 75% from the bank in the way of a mortgage for that purchase. And often that's generally based on the income the property is going to generate, the asset, i.e. the security itself, the property, as opposed to assessing that affordability on your income, your affordability and your ability to be able to pay that mortgage each and every month. However, a quick caveat, your first mortgage is always going to be a challenge. It's never going to be as easy, but your second, third, fourth, subsequent mortgages as a buy-to-let are going to be much easier to get than the very first one. It may even be that you use a strategy to supersize the cash flow you're generating from property. For example, we use HMOs and service accommodation to produce much more income than they would ordinarily be able to generate, say, as a family house. But if you're generating income like that, let's say you manage to build the business to get, say, a couple of HMOs that generate a couple of £1,000s a month. Now, if you've got a couple of £1,000s a month coming in, if you're not paying that towards a mortgage payment, let's say you're putting that towards rent, you could probably rent a really nice place, unless you live in London, of course, really nice place for a couple of £1,000s a month. Now, if you were going to purchase that property, you'd need a significant deposit. You'd need to be able to meet the affordability criteria as well in order to be able to get a mortgage of that size to get a property that big. So often people can live in a property that's much nicer than they'd be able to afford to buy by renting it, because it's the cash flow from the other assets that they've got are paying for it. Now let's talk about buying a home as your first property. Make sure you watch this video all the way to the end, because I'm going to break the numbers down so it makes it much more easier to understand. But if you're purchasing a home as your first property, you could probably get a 95% mortgage as well. That means you need to put a much smaller deposit down in terms of getting your foot on the ladder to be able to purchase that property. Also, as a home, you haven't got capital gains tax to pay each time you move from that property. For example, if you've got an investment property, when you sell that property, you've got capital gains tax to pay if it's in your personal name that you've purchased that property. Whereas if it's your home and you're living in it, when you sell it, there's no tax to pay on any gain that you've made. The buy-to-let mortgages, the rates that you'll pay will be much higher than you would pay, say, on a residential mortgage. So residential mortgage will get you more favorable rates, so your monthly payment will often be lower for the same equivalent level of debt in the way of a mortgage. The tax benefit also means that you could be purchasing a property, adding value to it, improving it, and making the value go up significantly. And when you move on from that property, you've still got no tax to pay. Some savvy investors use this by way of trading up the property ladder to end up with a much nicer home at the end of it. So for example, they'll start off with a small, say, 1-bedroom flat. They'll improve it, make it nicer, sell that, take the profit from that, then maybe buy a 2-bedroom house, a little terrace house, improve that, make that nicer, move on to a little semi, etc., etc. You get the idea, because the profit you're making each time, there's no tax to pay, you're doing it gradually and you're moving up the ladder. When you own your home, you're also not going to have a landlord at any point come to you and say, hey, look, it's time for you to move on now. You've been living here long enough. We want the property back for whatever reason it might be. Hey, that doesn't really happen that often in terms of a landlord. It's generally if there's a problem that the landlord asks the property back. But the reality is you don't really have the security when you're a tenant, because it could happen at any time that you could be asked to move on. So when you're in your home, that's not likely to happen. As long as you're paying your mortgage every month, they're not going to be taking you out of that property. No one's going to be asking you to leave. So the question is, which is the right one? Do you buy a home first, or do you buy that investment property first? Now, if you're getting started, what I like to do is look at a combination of the two. How does that work? Well, let me explain. Let's head over to the whiteboard and I'll explain what I mean over there. Let me go through a scenario where if you are purchasing a home, but also turned it into an investment, so it made money for you as well. Let me explain how this could work. So let's say you've got a property with a purchase price of £270,000. That's a typical type of a price for a property that you might be purchasing. And let's say you use a mortgage of 80%. So you've got 80% mortgage on here, and then you've got a deposit of 20%. That's 54k. So 216,000 is as a mortgage, 80%, and 54,000 pounds of your money you've put in. Then you'd have some other costs as well, for example, your legal costs, mortgage fees, etc. Probably little or no stamp duty because of the figure. Let's say you've got a couple of grand here that you've spent altogether. Now, at this stage, what you've done is that you've spent £56,000 to get into this property. Now, let's say what you're able to do once you're in this property is if you decided to rent out, say, 2 of the rooms. So 2 rooms at £400 generate you £800 a month. So this is 2 of the rooms within your house using a rent to room scheme. This would then generate you over 12 months £9,600 a year. As well as that, what you would get is capital appreciation. So on your property, let's assuming your £270,000 purchase gets a 5% increase of capital growth per annum, capital appreciation. That would then amount to £13,500. That means on this 270,000 original purchase, we've got a 5% annual increase. We're just averaging these figures. Let's say that's 13,500. So what that means is each year you'll be generating £23,100 a year. So that's not cash in your pocket because you've got the 9,600 you're taking in, but you're getting capital appreciation. The value of the property is going up by 13,500. So in theory, you've got £23,100 a year. Now over 3 years, that amounts to £69,300. That's how much in theory you've created, but you only invested £56,000 into the deal in the first place. Essentially what you've done, you've got your money back theoretically within 3 years just by following this simple scheme. Essentially what you've done here is you purchased a home, you've rented a couple of rooms out using the rent to room scheme, which is also very tax efficient, and you've generated an income from that, but you've also got capital appreciation that would happen on a property anyway. So this means your initial investment, what you've started with, not only you've got a home, but also a great return on your money as your first investment as well. I'd love to know your thoughts on what you think of this idea. I know for sure if I was going to start out right now and I was starting out, this is the method that I would follow to get my first foot on that property ladder. I'd love to know your thoughts. Pop it in the comment section below. And if you have enjoyed this video and you're curious, how is it that you find those great tenants? Then make sure you watch this video over here, which I've got lined up next for you. But just before you go and do that, make sure you click on my face down here, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on this video over here.